Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this topical fireside chat on driving true resilience, building a robust availability and backup strategy. For a bank, there is nothing more important than delivering an always-on customer experience. However, most current technologies are inadequate in ensuring this. Periodic backups that only provide a snapshot in time are not compatible with demands for RTOs and RPOs. To discuss this more in detail, we have with us today Mr. Sankarson Banerjee, CIO, RBL Bank. In this chat, we will discuss how technology leaders can ensure an always-on enterprise, no matter what unplanned or planned changes happen in the infrastructure, and how such a stance impacts business. Welcome, Mr. Banerjee.
Thank you, Ash.
To start with, sir, how crucial is the availability of data for a bank in the present circumstances? Is there a way by which banks, can this availability along with protection and analytics be combined? Having all these functionalities can lead to business continuity, data protection, and business agility. Your thoughts on this, sir?
Today, our big challenge is that banking has now become an e-commerce like 24/7 business. So, since the bank is always on, the data underlying the bank, the applications underlying the bank need to also similarly be always on. Earlier, we used to have the concept of branches. We used to have relatively less interoperability. If you were a customer of Bank X, all your operations were within Bank X. So if Bank X was down, you waited till it came back up. Today, you're doing a lot of cross-bank transactions all the time. So if Bank X is down, it will not affect only Bank X customers, but also the customers of other banks that want to deal with Bank X. So most of your payments, for instance, may not work. Your money transfers may not work. And so it's become a much more interconnected system, and it has become a system without end dates. There is no this thing, end of day, end of month concept. Now even the last payment mode, which is RTGS, has become 24/7. So everything has become real time, and we have to adapt to making all our data and applications available in real time, all the time. I mean, we can't say, okay, 2 hours we will not be available, or 5 hours we will not be available.
Great. But according to certain, I was just going through one of their reports. Cyber attacks in India witnessed a spike of almost 300% in 2020 to touch 11,58,208 as against 3,94,499 in 2019. Financial loss from cyber crimes in India was pegged at rupees 1.25 lakh crores in 2019. Given the quantum jump in attacks, this number would be significantly higher in 2020. How can BFSI technology leaders protect their organizations, especially banks, from cyber attacks such as ransomware?
So ransomware protection is primarily the only way we have, well, two. One is to prevent ransomware, which is really difficult. And the other is to make sure we have clean, immutable backups, which cannot be corrupted by ransomware. And we do it in multiple strategies. We have clean live backups, and we have clean offsite backups, which are very hard to infect. Offsite backups are easier to protect from ransomware, but harder to restore. So those are a very extreme case of things going wrong. But even online backups or backups that are near the production, there we are trying to get much more ransomware centric by making one-way gates, by preventing backups being infected by ransomware, by keeping many versions so that maybe the last few versions are infected, by the -1 or -2 or -5 version is not infected. So there are lots of techniques that today backup systems are using. It has become a very big threat. Among all the cyber threats that have indeed caused substantial financial issues, ransomware is probably the one that has caused us most worry. Now, the actual loss figures are probably overstated, I must say. But the number of cybercrime attacks that are attempted are quite large. Most loss actually doesn't happen through cybercrime, it happens through real world crime. Like a single PNB kind of fraud is far bigger than any cyber fraud that we've had. But at the same time, there is a large number of small frauds that keep happening, and that is what we have to keep protecting against. Ransomware has now become a bit of a commodity. People can buy an off-the-shelf ransomware software, tweak it a bit, and start doing ransom attacks. So those are the things we need to protect against, where there is a large number of relatively simple attacks. But if you don't protect against them, you'll get a large number of hits, large number of penetrations.
Sure, sure. Definitely, like you said, ransomware is the #1 threat today for banks and other BFSI organizations. Great. Moving on, sir. Today, every enterprise has cloud-first mandates for digital transformation initiatives. Should backup and recovery be at the forefront of cloud adoption strategy, and why? Cloud is definitely a critical component in disaster planning. We've seen that in the last 1.5 years. It relieves most of the tension with IT services, and it provides a new level of business continuity. Yet cloud isn't foolproof. Your thoughts vis-a-vis backup availability?
On backups, we have three kinds of backup requirements. One is where we back up something that we need to restore very quickly. So let's say we'll back up just before an update. So if an update goes wrong, we need to go back to the previous version, the snapshot that we started before the update. And we need to go back relatively quickly, within minutes. Then there are backups that we do on a continuous basis, where we may use that backup for other reasons, other analytics or offline data reporting, things like that. And of course, there is this permanent backup storage, backups that we need to keep for long-term storage. Now, long-term storage is not good for the cloud because it's relatively expensive. Long-term, eventually, when we say long-term, we don't mean 1 year. We mean 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. There, an offsite storage like a tape is still by far the most cost efficient and by far the most reliable, because you don't have to keep anything running. The tape is just a tape. You have to store it reliably, of course. You have to store it carefully and dehumidified and so on. But there is no cost to storing it. There is no machine that keeps running to keep it alive. And so therefore, tape, the cost of long-term storage is very, very efficient on tape. It's unbeatable. And because of that, we still will do tapes or other passive media for a while. Active media, we are increasingly looking at moving either to hard disk or to cloud. But of course, cloud in many cases is more efficient than an on-premise hard disk, because on-premise hard disk, to do backups, you have to keep the entire capacity of future backups also alive, as opposed to just the part that you're consuming. And backups can be quite voluminous, so that future capacity can be quite costly. You can't keep buying storage, unlike in cloud where you can keep adding storage. In the physical backup world, you have to buy a certain capacity. And because backups tend to be quite large, that capacity tends to be quite large, and then you have to keep it alive. You have to keep running it. So that is quite costly at times. But of course, on-premise backups are more under your control. They're more reliable. They're easier to offset. They're tape off. They're easier to keep in, keep secure for long periods of time. With cloud, it is much easier to back up. It is much easier to add incremental storage, but it is less obvious how to store it for long periods of time. For instance, if you're storing something for 10 years, are you sure you will still have a relationship with your cloud provider? But the hard disk is your own hard disk. So of course, it'll be there for the lifetime of its, which is about 10, 12 years. So those challenges are where we say we have to look at all these options. There is no single answer to backup and storage. As we go, the compute and data goes more on cloud. The primary backup goes more on cloud. And the instant restore versions tend to go more on cloud. And then anything we need to store for long periods of time, for 5-6 years, we will try and store on-premise hard disk. Or 30-40 years, we'll try and promote on a passive medium, like a tape.
Sure. So that's the strategy.
Correct.
Right. But when it comes to backup, how can technology leaders reduce costs and improve response times? Is there a way they can quickly resolve common infrastructure and backup related issues? Maybe by leveraging automation, machine learning, those kind of things. Is that
modern
possible?
backups, backups are still done the way they were done in the 1970s. Modern backup systems have not really evolved. We're still doing tapes or virtual tape libraries. I mean, we've taken a hard disk and made it look like a tape.
So it's ripe for disruption.
No, it's already been disrupted. There are already alternatives available. But there are two challenges. One is OEMs don't necessarily support better backup strategies. And secondly, we are not yet implementing in the large change manager, the process management required to implement these backup strategies. So continuous incremental backup is one example. I'm using a MacBook. MacBooks have had it for 10 years. It's called the time machine. They've had it for 10 years. Dropbox has been around for donkey's years. Dropbox is continuous incremental backup. The same technology obviously is available to enterprises, but enterprises are still more comfortable doing scheduled weekly, monthly, daily backups. The work processes are actually quite difficult to change. And of course, there is a correspondingly large investment in the software, in the new hardware, in the new storage mechanisms, all of which is not trivial. I mean, it's not like, it's not something that you can just wake up one morning and do. It is a large change, which is where a lot of people are falling behind on backups. Technology wise, modern backups have been there for a while. I would say at least 10 years. And many companies have invested in pockets. So many modern applications have modern backups. Legacy applications tend to continue to have legacy backup software. In the banking industry in particular, I've seen that legacy does indeed still rule.
Sure. Right. So finally, sir, any technology that doesn't have a positive impact on business is of no use. It has to eventually impact the top line or the bottom line or some business parameter, right? So in the context of, backup
and be one of the biggest challenges of backup. Business would say, "Ye kya hai? Isko faster karne ka, don't tell me. I mean, why do I sanction the budget for it?" It always used to become an administrative overhead. People would say, "Theek hai, faster hai, big deal." Two things made it business priority. What are the two things? 24/7 took away your backup window. You see, you no longer have, branch 7 baje band ho jayega. The thing will start up again at 9 in the night, 9 in the morning. So you have 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours to sit and do backups. Today, you don't have that. Today, RTGS closes at midnight, starts up at 5 minutes later. So you have 5 minutes of backup window. And the second challenge is that increasingly we are asked to give real-time forensic analysis. Like regulators, auditors, that they don't want to spend days and hours restoring something from even 6 months ago. They say, it's, so what if it's 6 months ago? Give it to me right away. Because they're used to getting it from the new age companies. If you went to any of these, let's say a Flipkart, and said, "Give me your, 6-month logs," they would give it to you in real time. Because the logs are on cloud, they are on modern backup systems, or for that matter, your own Mac. I can give you the record of what I did 3 months ago in real time. So auditors don't anymore understand or appreciate any lags. And this I faced in one previous, I used to work for NSE, and NSE went through a lot of investigations. And we used to tell them, our tape is stored offsite. That's the only backup we have. It will take us 3 to 4 days to get older backups. And they just weren't very happy about it. Increasingly, that is becoming a problem. The third business problem is that restore time. So if your things fail, then you have very little time to restore, because everything is now a running operation. These three have made it, these big trends have made it a business priority. So backup is now the headache of the business manager and not just the CIO.
Sure, sir. One final question, sir. Going forward, how critical would it be for banks to fuel innovation, not just from a backup availability perspective, but overall, to align with the new normal, as they call it? How critical would innovation be, and how would a technology leader fuel business innovation?
So banks don't fuel innovation, they support innovation. Banks themselves don't have huge innovation armies or, researchers or something. But BFSI in general plays a very critical role at adopting innovation and taking it to scale. Banking usually, everywhere, not just in India, but banking has usually been the first port of call for technology companies. So, and we continue to play that role. We are taking innovation that happened in the e-commerce world and taking it to a much bigger scale in banking. And the banks that do it better, obviously, benefit ahead of the curve. But and that's what I see as the role of banking in general. We are a big industry, so whatever we promote becomes the norm.
Sure. And as a technology leader within the enterprise, within the bank, as a technology leader, what kind of innovations can a CTO or a CIO bring about going forward by leveraging technology?
Today, there is a lot of scope for that because banking has become a software business. It's no longer about banks and branches and opening hours and security guards. It's much more about electronic transactions. In fact, in RBL Bank, more than 60% of our transactions are digital. And I don't remember exactly what the last figure is, but I think only 6% of our customer base ever visits a branch. And I suspect this is true across the industry. Maybe we are maybe a little more digital than the others, but I suspect the general trend is true across the industry. Banking has become a technology-centric digital business. Whether a bank chooses to or not, it has become that. And therefore, a CIO has a lot of scope in innovation, making the user journeys faster, to making things more secure, to making things like audit runs much quicker. Then financial, asset liability management, making it far more accurate. Anti-money laundering being much more accurate, fraud being much more, real-time fraud, debit card, UPI, real-time fraud being much more accurate than it used to be. This is where a lot of scope for innovation happens.
Sure.
In addition to all this, there is also innovation that happens simply in keeping such large IT setups alive, which is not directly related to business. So, ransomware, for instance, banks are the target of ransomware because banks have money. And therefore, we need to invest in innovating on ransomware protection. We will probably invest much more ahead of the curve than others. I mean, healthcare is another place where you will see a lot of ransomware innovation because, again, healthcare, they may not have money, but they have something that is very, very difficult to, hold back. Other companies can say, okay, my IT system is down, but the rest of the business is running. So maybe, for instance, a liquor company can say, okay, my IT system is down, I'll, challan trucks by hand because liquor will still get produced. But a healthcare industry or a banking industry can't say that. And therefore, we will be ahead of the curve with some of these, and fintech absorption. So cybersecurity, digital work process innovations, those things we will definitely see CIOs adopting a lot more.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, going forward may not be cloud, but definitely these areas, definitely, I think
I suspect definitely cloud also because, the economics of cloud are changing everything. And increasingly, yes, there are lots of economics that are efficient even on on-premise today. But it is increasingly shifting to being more cloud friendly. And also many of the services are available only as cloud. Today, you can't buy Office 365 without a cloud. So even whether you're for or against cloud doesn't matter after a point. And that is going to be the trend with many OEMs, that they will sell only cloud subscriptions. So we are seeing that trend very strongly. It is definitely more cloud than less.
Okay. Great, sir. Amazing discussion there. That's all we have time for. To sum up the discussion, cloud disaster recovery is a powerful tool for CIOs. It gives them options and can reduce costs, especially upfront capex. But it may not be for every organization. Ultimately, only the business knows which data to protect and how much they will pay to do so. Whether the technical solution is the cloud, a secondary site, or a managed DR service. Thanks once again, Mr. Banerjee, for that interesting conversation. Thanks, viewers, for being with us. Keep watching Economic Times Spectrum. Thank you.
Thanks, Yash. Thank you for inviting me.